We have to start off though with Arsenal. Their struggles continue. They lose to Inter Milan. 1-0 win, 1-0 loss for Arsenal. Arsenal have been struggling of lately in all competitions. We know the loss that they had this weekend in the Premier League, that they suffered to Newcastle. If you look at you know, in the last 6 games, they've suffered 3 defeats. They drew a game against Liverpool. The two their only wins in that 6 game stretch came against Shakhtar Donetsk and Preston at the AFL Cup. Hasn't been the best stretch of games for Arsenal. If you're an Arsenal supporter, it's been a little rough. If you're watching your team almost concede the title this early into the season, it's getting that rough for Arsenal. When you look at the fact that they're sitting fifth in the Premier League, they've already suffered 2 losses. They've dropped points in 5 out of the first 10 games. They've fallen 7 points off Liverpool, 5 points off City. And keep in mind that they have a game coming up this weekend against Chelsea away. And then in the Champions League, you suffer this 1-0 loss today that you did to Inter Milan. And against Inter Milan that, honestly, they put out a little bit of a B team, almost like a not quite a B team, because you still had important pieces like a Lautaro Martinez, a Hakan Çalhanoğlu, a De Vrij, a Jan Sommer, a Dumfries. But you also had some important pieces of this team on the bench not involved. You're talking about Alessandro Bastoni, Federico Di Marco, Nicolo Barella, Enric Mkhitaryan, Marcus Thuram, who are all important pieces for what Inter Milan want to do on a game-to-game basis. Simone Inzaghi decided to give a lot of his important players of a rest, and probably has to do with the fact that this weekend they do take on a Napoli team who is currently sitting first in Serie A with 25 points, a point above Inter Milan, who are sitting in second. So obviously that's a massive game, and in my mind, Inzaghi has, or what I'm assuming is Inzaghi is resting and doing a little bit of rotation in this game to be 100% in that important heavyweight battle this weekend in Serie A. So I can understand why exactly. There's that aspect to it, of course. But if you're looking at Arsenal, this is many games now that Arsenal, and by the way, the great thing about this one game is Martin Odegaard, he was able to get his first appearance since suffering that ankle injury that he did with Norway. So there's that aspect to it, and that will boost Arsenal. But when he has been gone, and let's just consider he came on late in this one and didn't really, have that big of an impact as expected with the ankle injury coming this late. But if you've seen Arsenal since his injury, they have struggled to create. They lack that cutting edge in attack. They lack creativity without him, and because of the fact that Kai Havertz, he's not the most creative player playing in midfield. Trossard, the same. Saka, Martinelli, they're not really creative players. Your fullbacks are not creative fullbacks like Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson are. You have 2 center halves playing fullback that do what they can going forward, but don't have that passing range and ability that that a Reece James or a healthy Reece James they'll have, or anything at that top level going forward. You don't get that from your fullbacks, and you don't have much creativity without him, and you're lacking cutting edge. Sometimes they lack a little bit of dynamism in attack. It's a team that looks almost clueless on how they're gonna get the goal, and without that, drawn up set piece, essentially a training ground set piece or a wonder moment of magic, there is not much goes into this team. They don't look that dynamic, and they could have played that game, for another hour or two. It didn't seem like Arsenal was gonna get that goal unless Inter Milan handed them that goal. You didn't see how they were gonna create. Arsenal, they had 20 shots, but they only were able to get 4 shots on target, which shows that they're having to, the shots. Yeah, they got 20 shots, but they're not high percentage shots, not threatening shots, no clear cut out opportunities, almost half chances, and a lot of half chances and a lot of trying to make something out of nothing sort of opportunities. I thought Arsenal had a moment early on in the second half, or later on the first half, I'm forgetting exactly when it was in the game, where they took advantage of a turnover, or Martinelli or Havertz is able to find Martinelli, and Martinelli decides to try to be vertical and get it past the near post of Summer, hits the side, and I think, I'm struggling to find real clear cutout opportunities. Now, of course, Inter Milan, despite having a lot of, despite arresting Di Marco and Bastoni, this is a team that's always going to be solid defensively, and they're not going to give much space in between the lines to play through. They're not going to be they're not going to be crazy open and allow themselves to get ran in behind. They have a good defensive backbone to them. And it was always going to be that way. You have the quality as well from Lautaro Martinez that could be threatening. And yes, this wasn't the first team for Inter Milan, but when you're playing against this Arsenal team, you get that one moment. That one moment may be enough, and turns out that moment came from the handball from Mikel Merino, in which, look, that led to the penalty with Taremi's back flip. Look, I have sympathy for those close range penalties, because it's just, it's just so hard to react in that way. What I don't have sympathy over Mikel Merino is you're defending in your box. Why do you, yes, I understand you need to move your arms to create leverage, but he has his arm hand out like this. When you have your arm hand out like this, you put yourself in a vulnerable position. When ricochet goes straight to the hand, how are you going to defend yourself with that? You can't defend in the box with your hand up like this. Even if you're making slight movements to adjust your positioning to get on the right side of Taremi, to block off any sort of opportunity he can have of having an attempt at goal, or even playing, or even doing a flick on or anything of that sort. Yes, I understand having to move on to get positioning, but you shouldn't be moving your hand like this. It's, it's unfortunate. It is unfortunate because, again, I talk about how Arsenal really didn't create that much going forward. Inter Milan, they had a few opportunities in transition that they could have done a little bit better on, but overall didn't create a whole lot. Without that opportunity, I really didn't see how Inter Milan was going to get that goal. I thought this had 0-0 written all over it before that penalty, but it takes a moment like that, penalty for Inter Milan. Hakan Çalhanoğlu, an extremely experienced player, slots it straight down the middle, 1-0 for Inter Milan. And then in the second half, they were able to close shop, defend really, really well, and get the result. They have a professional way of doing about it. They defend really, really well. They're opportunistic in the counter, in the attack. Yeah, for Arsenal, I said the same issues again. The lack of creativity, not being able to create much. They had that opportunity from Saliba on a corner kick that he could have done better on. There was also another opportunity from Gabriel, a flick on. But again, it just shows, it proves my point exactly what I was saying about Arsenal and their lack of creativity. Their best chances from this game came from set pieces. I have to say the best chances from this game came from set pieces, came from two corner kick opportunities. Apart from that, I don't remember a real clear cut out opportunity. I know Kai Havertz had a little bit of an opportunity where he did really, really good on, tested Jan Sommer on the back post with the curling effort. But apart from that, it's pretty it's pretty rough to watch, I have to say. And there was some interesting aspects of this game as well. Mikel Arteta, he got a yellow card. He got a yellow card for essentially he grabbed the ball and might have not been fully out of bounds, and led to a little bit of controversy. He ended up getting a yellow. Not a controversy, not necessarily controversy, but he ended up getting a yellow. Apart from that, though, look, your Arsenal, obviously, you look at, obviously, Inter Milan is definitely a better team than Chelsea at this moment in time. One is competing for Serie A and Champions League. The other team is trying to make their way back into the Champions League, make their way back in the top four of the Premier League, obviously. But I have to say, yes, this loss is a pretty bad loss, but it's a forgiving loss in that you play in this Champions League format with 24 teams, or with from 9th place to 24th team, get to play in a playoff to get into the knockout stages, to get into the round of 16. There is a little bit of a little bit mercy there is in the Champions League. There is some leeway you can have, and you can suffer a defeat like Arsenal did. So I do think the level of importance of this weekend's game against Chelsea is much higher than this game. As I said, obviously Inter Milan is a better team than Chelsea at this current moment in time. But at the same time, with Chelsea, at the same time, Arsenal can find themselves, if they lose to Chelsea away, depending on what happens with Liverpool, they can find themselves 10 points off Liverpool through 11 games. And also another huge thing is, let's say Man City can take care of the deal this weekend as well. They can find themselves 8 points off Manchester City just after 11 games, which is, wow, that's almost impossible to come back from. Usually City are doing the comebacks, let alone now Arsenal. It's a massive, massive game. If you're an Arsenal fan, it's going to be a difficult one with the way Chelsea has been doing away to Stamford Bridge. And yeah, I look forward to previewing this game more in a whole later on this week.